Hi guys, Craig here. Today I'm going to do a discharge test on a VoltX battery. This battery is a 12.8 volt, 100 amp hour battery. I've charged it to 14.6 volts, which is 3.65 volts per cell, which is what it says here in the specs for the battery, 14.6 at standard discharge current of 50 amps. So I don't know if I've got exactly 50 amp load to put on it, so we'll put some load on it and we'll see how it goes. What I've also done is I've put a spare shunt that I had at the battery. So there could have been a little bit of losses between the cabling at the battery all the way up to this shunt up here. So I figured, hey, let's put a second shunt in. What I've also done is I've configured these shunts so they're on exactly the both same settings, but it'll be interesting to see whether they actually give some different figures. So let's start the discharge test. Put some load on here. Okay. So we're pulling 642 watt, which is 52 amps. I'm pretty sure the BMS will be able to handle that. So we'll run it at 52 amps. Now, obviously, 52 amps is a big load on a 100 amp battery. This battery is really designed, charge your laptop while you're away camping, potentially run your fridge and a few lights. That's about it. You wouldn't really want to be putting more than that sort of load on it. And in a real world test, you probably wouldn't load it up to 50 amps continuously until the BMS cuts out. Speaking of which, I believe the VMS, it's going to cut out at 10 volts. So 2.5 volts per cell. And I've reset the multi-plus here so it has a lower voltage disconnect. So the inverter's not going to cut out before the BMS on the battery trips out. So I'll follow this discharge test along the way. I'll come back in a little bit of time and we'll see how it's going. Okay, back at the VoltX test, some time has passed and we're now down to 29% remaining battery capacity, and we've amp hours consumed to 66.4. So the voltage has come down quite a lot, but remember it's going to cut out at 10 volts. Just out of interest, we'll go to the other shunt. Let's have a look at the 66.3, 66.4. So it's very close. There's not a lot of losses between the two shunts. So as I said earlier, and excuse the wrapping of the duct tape around the battery. I pulled it apart. I couldn't help myself. I wanted to have a look what was inside. So if anybody's interested, I'll probably put up a little video review of me pulling that battery apart and having a look at the cells and what the BMS is inside. So what I was about to say was, there's not a lot of difference between this shunt and this shunt here in terms of the actual amp hours consumed. So interesting. We'll come back a bit later on and I'll give you an update to how this battery's performing. Okay, back at the VoltX test, the load is now disconnected. So obviously the BMS is kicked in at 10 volts. So we'll put a bit of charge into it by plugging in a solar panel. It should then come back up online. And bear in mind, guys, while this is happening, this battery cost me about $400 delivered. So it's a fairly cheap battery and we were putting it under a fair bit of load. Now, did it get its 100 amps? Look, I really doubt that it did. Oh, there we go, load's back on. We'll turn that off and let's have a look. So 90.1. So there you go. 90.1 amp hours the battery produced out of its rated or claimed 100 amp hour. Have I done a fair test? You guys be the judge of it. I think I might have been a little bit harsh by pushing as much load through the battery as I had. But hey, it is rated at 50 amps. Yes, we were a couple of amps over 50, but it should have handled the load just fine. It's about 10% under what it's rated at. Is that a fair test? I think it is. And look, for $400 delivered, I actually think the battery did okay. Tell me what you guys reckon. Leave your comments below. Thanks, and have a great day. Look, I'm back at the VoltX battery, and I thought I'd give it another discharge test. Was I fair to it, pulling just over 50 amps continuous until the battery died? Probably. It says it can do standard discharge current of 50 amps, but we know we only got 90 amp hours out of it, and you know, it cut out at 10 volts. So I thought I'd do another discharge test. I've reset both shunts. I've cleared the history. So let's put some load on it. I'll take the solar out of it. So I've charged it back up now. It's been sitting now a little while on float. So, you know, cell voltages would have settled down a little bit. Let's retest it at, say, half of that load, or as close as I can get it to half of that load. And let's see what it puts out. Hopefully it puts out more than the 90 amp hours it did on the last discharge test. So let's put some load on it. And I've got a couple of lights just to increase the load a little bit. Okay, if we have a look at that, 21 amps, 280 watt. So we'll let that run. Obviously that's going to take quite a bit of time now to do the discharge test. I'll come back during the test. I don't know whether I forgot to mention or not, last time the shunts were that close. It was within about 0.3 of an amp. So, you know, it doesn't really matter having the shunt as close to the battery as I thought it might have helped. I don't think it does. You know, real world testing, you know, 0.2, 0.3 of an amp, I don't think it's really going to matter. Back at the VoltX second discharge test, let's just have a look. Okay, we're down to 83%, holding at about that 22, 23 amps. 3 hours and 28 minutes to go. So we'll come back a bit later on and see how it's progressing. Okay, we're back with the VoltX battery discharge test. We're down to 37%, still pulling that 22 to 23 amps. So it's still ticking along nicely there. Amp hours consumed 60.5. So we'll come back in a little while's time and give you an update. I just thought I'd compare the two shunts. So the T-Rig shunt, which is the one that's furthest away, is showing 62.7 amp hours consumed. And if we just quickly go to the other one, this is the one that's directly at the battery, and it's showing 63.4 amp hours consumed. So there you go, guys. There is a little bit of a difference, and I'd say that difference is because we're now pulling a lower charge out of the battery. I think yesterday when I did the test, it was that close in comparison with the two shunts. It really didn't make much difference. But at a lower discharge rate, it's definitely making a difference. Okay, shouldn't be long now. We've consumed 89.5 amp hours. We've got 6% capacity remaining, and you can see the voltages come right down to 11.21, and will cut out at 10 volts. So this is the shunt that's directly at the battery. Let's just check the other one. And that's showing 88.7. So you can definitely see a difference there of just over 1 amp hour with the two shunts. So that's an interesting result. Down to 1% now on the battery monitor, and 94.6 amp hours, and the voltage has really come down now. 10.2 volts. Won't be long now. I doubt we're going to get the 100 amp hours out of this battery, but you know, look, this battery was under $400 delivered, and I ordered it on eBay with a discount code. It was under $400, and quite honestly, you know, if this thing can get 95 amp hours out of a rated 100, guys, I reckon that's a pass, hey? Let's let it click over to 95 amp hours. There we go, 95 amp hours from a theoretical 100 amp hour capacity. I reckon that's really good. All right, we'll stay with it. 10.04, 10.03, it should cut off any second now. We'll stay with it. 9.99. Okay, look, I'm not surprised. Don't forget, this will be the voltage at the shunt and not the voltage at the battery. So the battery voltage will possibly be slightly higher. Still going. There obviously could be a little bit of play in the BMS settings as well, although it does say 10 volts cut off. So we'll just keep watching it. $9.78. Shouldn't be long now. $9.68. $96 amp hours now. Still going. Okay, I'm surprised that it hasn't cut out now. I wouldn't think that there'd be 0.6 of a volt between the shunt and the battery. $96.4. Surely it's got to cut out. And there we go. So 96.5 amp hours, guys. Wow, not bad at all. So what we'll do now is we'll turn the loads off. And we'll plug some solar into it. So let's just make it out of that. So 96.5 amp hours. And let's just check the other shunt, which is the one away from the battery. $95.4. So there we go. 1.1 amp hour more, which I think is pretty good. Now, I'm just thinking about this, and I reckon the inverter cut out, and I had the inverter down to as low as possible cutout voltage as I could, but I actually think the inverter cut out and not the battery. And the reason I'm saying that is because the shunt did not lose communication. So there you go, guys. Possibly we could have got a little bit more out of this battery. We'll never know, because look, frankly, I don't think I'll bother testing it again. But 96.5 in my books, you know, that's a pass. And you can see we come up 6.5 amp hours from going from 50 amps continuous down to 23 amps continuous. And it didn't cut out at 10 volt, which surprises me. So something's going on there. That's questionable. But hey, I reckon that's a tick. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed this test. Again, look, this is not a laboratory test. It's just, you know, some guy in the shed tinkering around and seeing what we can pull out of these batteries. But for less than 400 bucks, can't go wrong.